When I walked into that courtroom, my father chuckled low, cold, the kind of laugh meant to cut you open. My mother just shook her head, like I'd embarrassed the family one more time. I didn't say a word. I stood there in my SEAL uniform, the same one they'd told me I'd never earn, the same one they said would ruin their name. For a second, no one moved. Even the judge froze when he saw me. And in that silence, all I could think was 14 years ago they threw me out for choosing honor over blood. Now they were suing me for the house my grandfather left me, the one thing that still carried his name, and mine. My name is Velma Brooks, and this is the day my family learned what silence can do when it finally speaks. The hammer slipped from my hand when I heard the slow roll of a postal truck outside the gate. Finn barked once, then went quiet, watching me with those steady gray eyes that seemed to understand more than words ever could. The fog off the Astoria Bay hung thick that morning, soft enough to swallow every sound, but the creak of the old porch under my boots. I brushed the sawdust from my palms and climbed down. The postman didn't linger, just tipped his cap, left an envelope on the railing, and disappeared into the fog. Finn sniffed at it, tail stiff, as if he could already smell the trouble sealed inside. The paper was heavy, official, stamped with the county seal, Clatsop County Court Summon. Below it, two names that froze me where I stood, Walter and Elise Brooks. Plaintiffs, my name below theirs alone on the opposite line. Defendant. For a moment, even the wind held its breath. 14 years of silence between us, and this was how they decided to reach me. I tore the envelope open anyway, though I already knew what it meant. A lawsuit. Over the house, my grandfather left me the only thing that still carried his name. The air around me felt colder, tighter, as if the bay itself had drawn back. I set the papers down on the porch rail, leaned against the weathered post, and let out a laugh that didn't sound like one. Guess that's one way to start a conversation. Out beyond the fog, the water glimmered faintly under the last light of evening, long and pale like an old scar. My grandfather's voice came back to me then, quiet but sure. Honor is a tide, it always comes back. I wasn't sure I believed him. Not until that letter found me. And maybe, just maybe, that tide was coming home. The road into town curled along the bay, fog hanging low enough to touch. I hadn't driven there in months, but something pulled me toward Luann's porch light, the same warm yellow I remembered from childhood. She greeted me with a shaking smile, poured mint tea into chipped cups, and sat across from me in silence. Then she finally spoke. My parents had been there the week before. They'd gone into the cellar, pried open the hatch, and taken a wooden chest, claiming it held my grandfather's belongings. My chest tightened. That hatch wasn't storage, it was sacred. My grandfather had made me promise never to open it, and now they'd broken the one line that still connected us. When night fell, I went home. The house creaked under the wind, and the waves hit the shore in slow rhythm. I lifted the trapdoor, climbed down into the cellar, and felt the cold bite of dust and salt. One board on the floor sat loose. I wedged a crowbar under it and pried. An old iron chest lay beneath, rusted, heavy, forgotten. When I opened it, the air that escaped smelled of oil and time. Inside were fragments of another life. A navy blue coat, a photo of my grandfather beside a half-built ship, and a small leather journal. The first line read, "If this ever reaches you, Walter, I forgive you for the day you ran. Ran, forgive." My father had never spoken of serving. No one had. I sat on the cold floor as the wind howled through the cracks above, whispering like ghosts of the sea, reminding me some things never drown. They just wait to be found. I read through the journal till dawn. Between the shipyard notes and sketches were pieces of a life fractured by war storms, silence men lost to the tide. On the last page, faint pencil marks formed a pattern. Morse code. I copied it down, translating one symbol at a time. Behind the vessel that never sailed. I looked up at the living room wall, the painting of the unfinished ship, my grandfather's favorite. I took it down. Behind the frame, a wooden panel had been cut clean and hidden in plain sight. I pried it open. Inside was the original will sealed in wax and a smaller envelope aged to yellow. I unfolded it carefully. A photograph slid out, first my father in a Navy uniform, young and proud. In the corner, a red stamp bled through the paper, AWOL. Absent without leave. The truth hit hard. The man who'd mocked my service had once worn the same uniform and run from it. Maybe that's why my grandfather left the house to me, I thought. Not out of pity, but faith that I'd repair what Walter broke. Outside, the fog pressed against the windows, soft and still. I placed the photo beside the blue coat, my fingers tracing the worn fabric. For the first time in years, I didn't just hear the ocean, I felt it breathing with me. The tide was turning, and deep down, I knew it wasn't done with us yet. The morning of the hearing fog from the Pacific swept over the stone steps of Clatsop County Courthouse, wrapping everything in pale gray silence. I parked at the curb, caught my reflection in the side mirror, dark blue dress uniform, pressed collar medals, catching what little light broke through the mist. I hadn't worn it in years. It wasn't pride that made me put it on. It was the only language my parents had ever respected discipline-proof posture. Inside, the benches groaned as I walked down the aisle. My father looked up and smirked the same crooked grin that used to mean punishment was coming. "Playing soldier again, huh?" His tone said everything his words didn't. My mother shook her head, a small motion of disappointment that hit harder than any insult. The clerk called the case voice, echoing against the paneled walls. Then a deeper voice followed Commander Brooks. "Please step forward." I looked up, and the air left my chest. Judge William Crane. He had been my commanding officer in Yemen, the man who shook my hand the night 47 civilians made it out alive. His eyes met mine. A small nod. Not greeting an order. "Stand tall." My father began, his voice steady, but laced with rehearsed righteousness. "The house has been neglected for over 10 years. We've maintained it, paid the taxes, kept it from collapsing. She abandoned it, abandoned us." He slid a stack of receipts across the table. "Forgeries, all of them." I placed my own folder on the desk, thicker stamped, signed. Payment slips, bank confirmations, every dollar I'd sent to keep the roof standing. I didn't abandon anything, I said evenly. I just stopped begging for a place in a family that never wanted me home. The room went still. Judge Crane's gaze didn't waver. His pen tapped once, twice against the bench. "I've seen you stand taller under fire, Commander. You can handle this too." The murmur started, then he'd said too much. My father's face flushed red. "See, always using that uniform to play hero?" He slammed his palm against the table, papers scattering. Then my mother's whisper cut through the noise, trembling but sharp enough to pierce bone. "Walter, stop. They'll find out about the letter." I froze. The letter? My heartbeat thundered in my ears. Crane's gavel struck once for recess. 10 minutes. I stepped into the hallway, the smell of salt and varnish lingering from the courthouse floorboards. The fog outside pressed against the windows, turning them to mirrors. My reflection stared back, same uniform, same scars. But I wasn't here to fight. I was here to defend what truth had left of me. Judge Crane appeared beside me, quieter than the storm he carried. "Your father served under me in '89, he said low. "And I know what Henry forgave him for. Don't let this case become another battlefield." His words cut deeper than any order. When the recess ended, I walked back into that courtroom, feeling the weight of 2 wars, one in my blood and one in my bones. Rain came down in sheets that evening, blurring the windows until the world outside vanished. Finn slept near my feet, his tail twitching with each rumble of thunder. I was halfway through the paperwork from court when headlights swept across the porch. A figure moved through the downpour, clutching a coat to her chest. My mother. She hesitated at the bottom of the steps before coming up, water dripping from her sleeves. Her voice shook as she spoke. "You need to know something, Velma." She reached into her bag, pulled out a folded document, edges worn soft from years of hiding. It was a copy of my grandfather's will, the handwriting unmistakable. "He sent this to me before he died," she said. "Your father hid it. He wanted the house to be yours. He said you were the only Brooks who still understands the sea." The words lodged somewhere deep in my throat. I unfolded the paper, tracing the inked curves of my grandfather's name. The same signature carved into the wood of the front door, the same hand that had built the beams above our heads. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked. "Because he swore he'd fix it," she said. He thought silence could pay a debt. But silence just rotted him from the inside. Her shoulders shook. "He was being blackmailed, Velma. That's why he filed the suit. He was terrified the truth would come out." The room tilted. My father hadn't been fighting for a house, he'd been fighting to keep his past buried. When she left, I sat on the porch, opened my grandfather's journal again. On the last page, hidden under a smear of dried ink, another line waited. Honor doesn't mean you win, it means you don't lie. I closed the book, listening to the storm drum against the roof. The sound wasn't chaos anymore. It was command, a rhythm I knew too well. Just before midnight, the phone rang. Static hummed on the line, then a familiar voice measured steady. Commander Brooks, this is Judge Crane. A pause. I think I owe you an explanation about your father. And just like that, the tide began to turn again. The night after Crane's call, I couldn't sleep. The tide hit the rocks with a rhythm too steady to ignore each crash echoing somewhere behind my ribs. By dawn, the fog had swallowed the pier. I went there anyway. Judge Crane stood at the edge holding his old Navy cap in both hands. His voice was low, worn thin by memory. Your father served under me in '89, aboard the USS Hanley. There was a storm. One of our men went overboard. Walter abandoned his post. Your grandfather took the blame, lost his rank, and never spoke of it again. The wind cut through me like a blade. My grandfather had carried that shame to his grave. Crane sighed. Henry believed in second chances. He thought shame could turn into growth. And instead, I said quietly, he died with his honor buried. Crane nodded, then handed me a folder sealed in plastic. The report, your grandfather's forged signature. You could win with this, he said, but it would destroy him completely. After he left, I stood alone, the wind tearing at the edges of the paper. I could end the case. I could end him. But some victories are too small for the cost. That night, I sat beside the old chest and opened my grandfather's journal. A loose letter slipped out my handwriting from 8 years ago. Dear Mom and Dad, I don't know what kind of daughter I became, but I hope one day you'll see I never left. I just chose a different battlefield. I'd written it and never sent it. Back then, I'd called it strength. Now I knew it was fear of forgiving, of letting go. I folded it again, placed it beside the journal, and whispered, Grandpa, I won't repeat your silence. I'll break it the right way. 2 days later, rain came heavy and hard. I was coiling the boat rope when I heard the rattle of an old truck. My father stepped out, soaked through, eyes hollow. You've been talking to Crane. He came to me, I said. What did he tell you? Enough. He looked toward the water, voice rough. You think I wanted to sue you? Your grandfather would have destroyed me if I hadn't run. He reached into his coat and pulled a folded letter. Henry's the original one. I forgive you, Walter. Don't waste your life trying to rewrite what's already paid for. He swallowed hard. I found it after he died. He forgave me, but I never forgave myself. Every time I saw you in that uniform, it felt like he was staring through you. I'd waited years to hear that, but there was no satisfaction, only the sight of a man emptied out by his own mistakes. I could end this tomorrow, Dad. One paper and it's over. Then do it, he said softly. Maybe I deserve it. No, I told him. You deserve to live knowing someone finally broke the cycle. He stood there silent until thunder cracked above us. When he left, the porch light caught his limp, same side as mine. Same wound. You taught me what running looks like, I whispered. Now let me teach you what standing still means. Morning came thick with fog, the kind that swallowed every sound before it reached the street. The wind off the Columbia Bay rattled the courthouse flag as I stood in front of the mirror, staring at the Navy uniform draped neatly over the chair. I left it there. A white shirt, black slacks, that would be enough. Honor didn't need to be worn. It needed to be lived. When I walked into the courtroom, the whispering stopped. The silence was heavier than judgment. My father sat stiff in his chair, eyes rimmed with exhaustion and something close to shame. My mother clutched a small Bible in her lap, lips trembling against a prayer she couldn't finish. Judge Crane's voice cut through the stillness, calm but commanding. Commander Brooks, do you wish to add any new evidence I took? A breath, and placed the envelope on the table, the 1989 report, the proof that could erase him. Then I pushed it away. No, Your Honor, some truths deserve to rest beneath the waves. The air shifted. Crane paused, then nodded. So noted. My father's eyes closed. My mother's quiet sob broke the room in half. When the verdict came, it landed softly but final. The house was mine. The sound of the gavel echoed like a door closing on the past. My father whispered, "You didn't have to spare me." I looked at him. "You're still my father. That's punishment enough." As I stepped into the cold air outside, the wind no longer bit it, just carried the weight I'd finally set down. By late afternoon, the sky had turned the color of ash. The wind off the bay carried the smell of salt and rain, heavy and sharp, as I knelt by the pier to secure the ropes along my grandfather's old boat. The sound of an engine approached from the road above, uneven, familiar. When it stopped, I didn't need to look. I knew that cough of a truck. My father's boots hit the wet planks behind me, slow, careful. The air between us felt thinner than it ever had. He said nothing, neither did I. After a long pause, he reached into the pocket of his soaked coat and pulled out something small, silver, dulled by time. A compass, the one my grandfather used to keep clipped to his belt. He held it out, his fingers shaking slightly. "It was your grandfather's," he said quietly. "He gave it to me the day I left for the Navy. I didn't earn it back then. But maybe you will." I took it, thumb brushing against the cool metal. When I flipped the lid open, the needle wavered, spun once, and steadied north. A single raindrop landed on the glass, spreading like a tear that had been waiting years to fall. "Why now?" I asked. "Because you did what I couldn't," he said. "You faced the storm, and you stayed." The words hung between us, carried away by the wind. No apology, no ceremony, just the quiet transfer of something heavier than regret. One generation handing the weight of its name to another. I tightened my grip on the compass and looked up at the clearing sky. The clouds were breaking apart, streaks of pale light bleeding through. The air smelled of iron and seaweed, of war and home tangled together. "Maybe honor doesn't pass through blood," I murmured. "Maybe it passes through courage." He didn't answer. He didn't need to. His hand found my shoulder, steady for the first time in years. In that gray half-light, our shadows stretched across the wet pier, two figures facing the same horizon, the same tide. Two people who had once run, now finally standing still. A month later, Astoria's sky had softened to a pale blue, the kind that feels almost new after too much gray. The old house by the bay stood different now, fresh paint, a rebuilt roof, windows that no longer rattled with the wind. I'd spent weeks fixing it myself, each nail and brush stroke, echoing like a heartbeat, finally finding rhythm again. While cleaning out the storage hatch of my grandfather's boat, I found a small folded note tucked behind the ribs of the hull. The handwriting was as thin but steady. "For the next Brooks to serve, if you ever face a storm, steer with it, not against it." I smiled, reading it out loud to the empty dock. "I guess I did, Grandpa." That evening, my parents came over. My mother carried a pot of clam chowder, the same recipe she used to make when I was a kid. My father didn't say much. He just picked up a hammer and helped me hang the faded Navy flag along the porch rail. When he tightened the last knot, his voice was low but sure. "You made us proud, kid." "It took a storm to learn calm," I answered. We ate outside as the tide came in. No speeches, no apologies. Just the sound of waves and wood creaking beneath us. My mother glanced toward the water. "Your grandfather would have smiled today." "He's probably still watching the tide," I said. After they left, I sat on the porch steps, the compass open in my palm. Its needle glowed faintly under the porch light, steady as ever. Finn lay beside me, breathing slow, his bad leg twitching in sleep. The wind smelled of salt and pine, the sea whispering against the rocks. I thought of everything, the anger, the trial, the truths that broke us, and the quiet forgiveness that stitched us back together. "Some tides destroy, some return," I murmured. This one came to heal. The lighthouse beam swept across the bay, touching the flag, the compass, the old seal jacket hanging on the chair. I closed my eyes, and somewhere in that hush between waves, I heard it, my grandfather's voice, calm and sure as the sea itself. "Welcome home, Velma. Welcome 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 home, Velma. Welcome